Yep, there we go.
Right, all right, I will welcome everyone. I'll declare the meeting open, and we have no apologies.
Tracy Pads.
Okay, and we've got Neil on Teams.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Thank you.
Alrighty.
They'll just need to accept those. Accept that apology.
Oh, of course we will. I will so move it.
Oh, second.
Thank you. All those favour?
Aye.
Against? Okay, apology accepted. Okay, we have declaration of interest in minutes. Minutes of the meeting 15 December. Which was circulated. Well, a bit last year, thank goodness. Any comments or queries on those? No? Okay, I will move that we approve those minutes as a true record.
Second that.
Thank you. All those in favour?
No.
Yeah. Okay. And we have declarations of interest, which prompted me to actually update them.
So we need something in December. So that might have been a.
Yes, but then I said the
Yeah.
last week,
Yep,
so
yep, so that's a good-
I've come off some and gone on some, but nothing that's particularly relevant to the meeting. So, but we've updated that. Are there any other changes that need to be made, or is everything? You're good? Okay. You need to move this.
No.
Okay. Right, so, Audit New Zealand and internal audit.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members, okay if I sit here for presentations paper? So I just would like to say a couple of words before I invite David to do a presentation for us. So this paper outlines where we are with our internal audits. So we are making really good progress on the health and safety audit that is underway. And you'll see in the paper, we were due to do the capital expenditure planning and monitoring audit, and it led to a much broader conversation with David Seath from Deloitte around our whole program and where we are with it. And it's been quite some time since we did look at our internal audit and really sort of interrogate, are we sort of focusing on coming up on the most critical things? So with permission of the committee, I'd really like to explore that today and see if there is sort of favour around the table to have a bit of a fresh look at it. So on that note, I'll hand it over to you, David, to take us through some thinking.
Sure, thanks, Saskia. In terms of logistics, do you have the slides or do you want me to share them?
Yes, we have the slides. If you can just say next slide when you're ready. Can you see that, David?
I can't see the slides, no.
Okay,
Okay, that's good.
we can.
I can't.
Oh, and Neil can't.
I'll just change that one.
Okay, Wayne's just working on that.
Let me know when I can start talking.
Really right.
Good to go?
Can you see that now, David?
No.
Okay, we're
No.
working on the, okay. Well, we're on our understanding of your needs and
Perfect.
working on
Let's-
you getting visibility.
Yeah, great. Okay, so yeah, morning Chair, morning members of the committee. Like Saskia said, we've had a couple of conversations with her and Susan about upcoming internal audit engagements, and now I can see it. Perfect. And in the course of those conversations, we discussed the option of a bit of a reset or a refresh of the internal audit program as a whole, and whether that would be a useful exercise to undertake. And so we thought that it'd be a good idea just for me to present a few slides on the rationale and our thinking and where we've done it before and the approach to this. Chair, I was just proposing to set out a few key points and then take questions. Does that make sense to you?
Mm-hmm.
Cool. So slide 2 just summarises the conversations with Saskia and Susan, and I think the two key points from there are one is your internal audit resource is scarce, so it's really important that it is focused on the things that matter most to you. And the second point is try to broaden the focus of your internal audit efforts so that you're not just dealing with those kind of compliance type value protection matters, but you're broadening your thinking to think more about value creation and opportunities, with risk and opportunity being two sides of the same coin. If we could go on to the next slide.
I think we've skipped one.
Yeah, we skip one. So this just provides kind of global. Oh no, we've gone back. There we go. So global New Zealand and local government context. And again, the key point is there's an awful lot going on, and there's an awful lot of change going on, both in the country and in the local government sector. And so that's another reason why I think it's timely to make sure that the internal audit program you've got in place is responding to these things. And again, the two key points to raise are one, making sure that the program is picking up and giving you assurance on some of those potentially new and very topical risks. And I think the other important point there is that making sure that you're getting some assurance over those business as usual activities that the council's undertaking whilst the staff are really busy dealing with that big change agenda. And so, we talk through those benefits of revisiting this program in terms of not wasting time, making sure the resource is being applied in the right way. That kind of advice piece, as well as assurance. It's not just about telling you that you follow process. It's about giving you some advice on where processes could be improved and where you could take advantage of opportunities, and then looking at areas where specialists may be needed. In the internal audit mandates that I look after now, probably 5 years ago, we'd have been reasonably comfortable sending in a relatively inexperienced third or fourth year auditor to come and review your processes. I think those days are past now, and and quite rightly, clients are expecting, if we're going to do a project management review, then we need to put a project management specialist in it. If we're doing some fraud work and forensic work, it needs to be a forensic specialist. So having access to those sorts of specialist resources is important, and will again up the value that you're getting from the program. If we go on to the next slide. I don't propose to spend an awful lot of time on this one, but it just runs through in a pretty granular level on our approach to refreshing and developing internal audit plans. And this you're not alone in terms of thinking that it's timely to be doing an exercise like this. So it would be the first phase would be a desk-based review of relevant policies and procedures and documents, plus bringing in our knowledge of the local government sector and our knowledge gained through the internal audit mandates that we run with a lot of other clients in your sector. So we're currently the internal auditors for Invercargill City Council, Southland District Council, New Plymouth District Council. And so we've got some good experience that we can bring to bear in terms of what those organisations are focusing on. The second piece is the conversation piece, so interviewing your senior folks, CE and your auditor and the chair of the Audit and Risk Committee, to get their view on risks, hot topics, current risks, current issues, and then because then we've got the population there of things that matter most to you, and for some of those, your internal audit won't be able to help, won't be able to give you any assurance over things. But for certain of them, I think we will be able to do some work that will give you some assurance over the controls you've got in place to mitigate some of those risks are in place. And then steps 3 and 4 are just the processing of it, presenting a draft, making sure that it fits with your expectations, and then getting that draft finalised and approved, and setting out your plan for the next 3 years. Again, acknowledging that things are changing quickly. nothing is ever set in stone, but I think at least it kind of gives you a view over the next 3 years of those areas that you're going to focus on, and will give you the chance to prioritise them, because everyone wants to do everything, and we know there's not enough money to do everything. But at least if we've got the population there, and then we can have that conversation. And often, you know, in these processes, the richness is in the conversation between the ELT and members of the committee on reaching consensus over where you think the internal audit efforts should be focused on. The last couple of slides are just a couple on risk management, and it's picking up the comments I made on value creation and value protection. I'm a bit of a risk nerd, I'm sorry, but this is my favourite slide on risk, and I've presented this to lots and lots of clients. And it's just visualising the different types of risk that are out there. And organisations have a real tendency to focus on the black bubble, which is everything that could go wrong. And poor processes, poor controls, poor judgment, management override, those sorts of things. And that's very much those unrewarded risks and value protection. They also spend a bit of time on the light green bubble, which is just stuff that happens to you. And so it's all about how you respond. So we've had a few of those in the last 2 years with the pandemic and climate change and weather changes. You know, there's not an awful lot you can do to control that, which is why it's over on the left-hand side of that controllability access. So it's all about how you respond and what plans you've got in place, and are those plans being tested. But I think this process that we'd undertake will hopefully get people thinking a bit more about that dark green bubble, which is all about value creation. What can we do to take advantage of the risk landscape in order to create value for the organisation? And the example I always use with the internal auditors of Christchurch Airport, you know, Christchurch Airport is responsible for making sure planes land and take off successfully. That hasn't stopped them from investing in a big solar project, and hasn't stopped them from the investment in terrace, because they're looking at that dark green bubble rather than just focusing on the black one and the light green one. And then that second piece on the right-hand side just demonstrates the need to be thinking about strategic risk rather than spending your time focusing on operational and financial reporting, because, you know, 90% of business failures happen as a result of a strategic risk crystallising. And then the last slide just talks about in a bit more granular detail about what risk management should look like. It's a really important part of an organisation's policies and procedures, but we don't want to be creating a cottage industry and creating paperwork for the sake of paperwork. Your risk management procedures have to be, I think, of those 5 bullet points, I think the proportionality point is really important. I think the fact it's got to be embedded within the organisation is really important. And then that 5th one, to me, is the most important one. It's got to be dynamic, and I think that's another reason why I think it's timely to be revisiting the internal audit program and making sure that it is marrying up with those risks that matter most to you. And that's all I wanted to say. I'm happy to take questions.
Thanks, David. Questions? Comments? Is there anything from you?
No, just in terms of what I said in my opening, it has been some really good conversations with David where we are in our risk maturity, and how we haven't had a good look at it in the last 2 years. So yeah, unless of course the committee are happy with that direction, I would like to go ahead and engage Deloitte before the end of this financial year. So the next one, obviously, to talk timing with you, David,
Sure.
just to go and have a really good look at this and come back and obviously have conversations with the committee.
Yeah.
Just a couple of things. One, David, Tim here, that was excellent. First question, can I please get a copy of those slides? Because your favourite slide may become my favourite slide.
Yeah, no problem.
Really illuminating. I'm sorry if I'm being dim-witted today, but what report are we on at the moment?
Oh, we kind of skipped a wee bit to the one on 2241. What page is that? Page 141.
Page 8.
Internal audit NZ and internal audit update.
That explains why I'm lost. Thank you. Sorry for being a bit slow on that. I think that that is a very good way forward.
Yeah.
As I say, that favourite slide, because we did, it's just the nature of the beast is to go, what can go wrong as opposed to where's the opportunity. So I'm very happy with the direction that you're taking us. Thank you, Saskia.
And I think what would be good if we can, because obviously what we're looking to do is perhaps reset for the 23-24 year, as well as the ones going now.
Yeah.
We've got our next meeting in June, so if the work could be done for the next meeting, I think that would be ideal from a timing perspective, because then we're agreeing also what we think the audit plan should be for the next year.
But also from a broader timing perspective, when we don't know what we're going to be like post mid next year, or looking at our, not this long-term plan, but the next one, with all the reforms, what a great opportunity with the ediculture of looking at the opportunities of the risks, as opposed to just going, shit, what can go wrong?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a little bit, I suppose, in where we're at in our risk management journey. Because you've got to have your black bubble bit darker first before you can have some exciting green bubbles. And that might be with assessment, but okay, I think we're, yeah. So,
Madam Chair,
yes, sorry.
I wonder, on the basis of what's in this report, whether there's needs to be some reporting back to council, so that council is formally appraised of this situation and is also aware of what's happening, and maybe if there's any approvals required from council to get works done or whatever. But I think this report can't just sit here. I'm assuming it's going to be taken to council as well.
I think we'd need to be making a recommendation too, yes. Or is it within your delegation? Oh, we can, sorry, David, we can discuss that once you've gone, perhaps. Any more questions for David? No? Okay, well, I think we're,
I can confirm, Madam Chair, we can get that work done prior to the next meeting, so we'll be able to come to the June meeting with a plan.
Okay. Oh, well, great.
Lovely.
Well, we've got that recorded now, so that'll be easy.
And I'll send well, Saskia, you've got the slides, haven't you? So you can forward them on to the committee members. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, so
That's a really good question.
that's for the committee to now just decide what we recommend.
Yes, I don't think, off the top of my head, I don't think I've got delegation.
Okay.
No.
So I think there does need to be a recommendation.
Has Deloitte quoted for this one?
Yes, so they have quoted, it was within budget. So there is enough money. But, shall I say that in the open session, how much they quoted?
No, okay, so you've got a quote, and we can, it's just.
Going through the procurement.
Yes, that's right.
Okay. So I mean, I think we all think it's a really worthwhile exercise. I think what we have then is, if it needs to go to council, a recommendation for this committee to council that we engage Deloitte to undertake a review of the internal audit plan and to come back to the June meeting of the proposal. Is what that would look like for the next 3 years. Yeah.
I wonder if it only needs to note that for council's noting, because council doesn't need to approve it because it's within budget, so it's already provided for. So there's no approvals required. It's just making sure council notes what the plan is or what is said.
Okay. Yes. Alrighty. So if we can limit it that way, then that it's within. We've had confirmation it's within budget.
Yeah.
But that's our recommendation for council to note. That's what we're.
Yep.
So.
Okay.
Okay. I'll move that.
I'll second it, but I do have a query on the paper outside of that.
Oh yes. No, we'll talk to the plan.
Cool.
Okay. Cool.
Yep, so I see.
So that's our minute for that.
Cool.
And we might as well just do the rest of the internal update.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes.
Just look, a really simple one, about halfway down, in terms of the GST compliance, it says at this stage, council is not facing any penalty charges. Just that wording at this stage. So is the risk still open that we will, or is it?
We think it's a very slight risk. So we have heard from in their revenue, that they, that's pretty much their words at this stage. We just wanted to put it in there. We would be surprised if in their revenue, having had that compensation would give us any penalty charges. But we just wanted to,
It's not, we're not 100% out of the woods.
not
But
100%,
the daylights and trains.
but yeah, it's unlikely. that
Thank
we would change.
And okay, on the rest of the report, we've got the health and safety audits being done.
Yes, so that's the thing with Louisa's team, and that is underway starting next week. Conversations scheduled with staff.
So we should have that for the June.
We will have that for the June meeting.
Obviously, you have the procurement one.
Yes.
The capital expenditure that was done.
So, oh no, the capital expenditure has led to the conversation around our whole internal audit program. So that was the next one we were due to do this financial year, the last one.
Okay.
So what I'm suggesting is that gets thrown into the mix with the work that you want to do for us. So it might be that does that.
Clear when we get this program,
Yeah.
it just sort of goes tick tick, and I'm kind of like, what does the tick mean? So, okay, so
Right.
the capital expenditure planning and monitoring is on hold. Health and safety is coming to the June meeting.
Yes. Correct.
And procurement, we've got it here at this meeting.
Correct.
And everything else is up for grabs because we're re-looking at the program. Okay,
I note that point around the service confusing, so yeah, so that once we've had been doing the program.
awesome. And we've got just the outstanding audit action items.
Yes, so the outstanding audit action items, because of course we've got our new management report that we'll discuss later. In the, when we discuss the audit paper. So I have at this stage left them off here, but I'll incorporate them once you've accepted the paper today for the next time.
Right, and there's no outstanding internal audit actions.
There are some, yes, there's 4.
Where are they listed? That's what I couldn't find. This only refers to Audit New Zealand action items.
Sorry, hold on. So, maybe 1 moment, I might be on here. Yes, for, and we will discuss later. Audit New Zealand had noted that 4 recommendations from prior years remain outstanding.
Oh, yeah, no, that's Audit New Zealand external.
Oh, external, yes.
So are there no action items arising from any of the previous internal?
Oh, sorry, Madam Chair, sorry, Madam. Yes. Yep. Apologies,
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
Understood the question.
No, that's all good. Well, that's great news. You know, that's good. It's just double checking they haven't been sort of left off something. Okay, anything further on that paper? No? All right, so I'll move that we receive the report. Actually, has that other than it. Thank you, Tim. All those in favour, say aye.
No.
Against? Carried. Okay, so we've got, sorry, the agendas are a wee bit different to. So we're going to procurement audit now. It might be a different order in laws, but I've got to.
Yeah.
So procurement audit.
And in front of you today, we do have the final procurement audit that has been prepared for us by Deloitte. You'll note that there's 2 key recommendations. One within the policy and execution of procurement activities. So I suppose the challenge in this audit was that we had 7 of our more complex procurement plans that we did purposely choose, which were marked against a policy that had inherent flaws. So I think that was a sort of a bit of a double-edged sword, but we do take that point that the procurement policy does need a good review. And the second finding there really was around a lack of a framework for monitoring and reporting and record keeping across the organisation. And I think that is a fair finding as well. For example, there's no executive team reporting of our larger procurement. There are some that come up for council, such as our big procurement with Hilton Hogan and Delta and the like, that there is governance oversight of. But the other procurement, there's no one sort of view of it. So what I'm working on, and it's nearly there, is to resource this piece of work to get this fixed with pretty high priority on my work program to address this. And I should have some good news for the committee in terms of having, by our next meeting, have gone quite a wee way through to addressing those recommendations. Any questions?
Any questions?
I do have a number.
Mhm.
Page 25 of the agenda, and the table's not numbered, but we talk about no evidence of due diligence conducted over proposed procurement supplier. In the market that we live in, you know, we're a small town, New Zealand, are we need to do due diligence on Fulton Hogan, for example, every time we go to do, or Downer, because I'm not picking on anyone in particular. We've got big multinational organisations, a very limited number within our catchment.
So this was one of my conversation points with Deloitte over this audit, and what they said to me is that there's nowhere in our organisation where we have documented that at some point or at regular points that we do, for example, Fulton Hogan Delta, that we do some kind of due diligence. So what they said to me that I should develop up as part of that monitoring framework is a methodology, whether it be every 5 years, on the big ones that we use, that there is some method of due diligence. So I thought that was a fair enough comment, because I said it's ridiculous to do it every time we use Fulton Hogan.
Yeah. So then you have basically a list of pre-approved.
Yes.
And there was something in there about pre-approved.
Yes, and we do have a pre-approved, yeah, it's not supported. And I think in fairness, we probably need to take a good look as part of this work at the pre-approved list, because it has been quite some time since I think we have done that as an executive team.
Right. So, yeah, because the procurement policy, I think, well, we had 2 cracks at it, didn't we? And trying to simplify it down.
Yeah.
It's a bit of the beast. So I think another review of that as well in line with it, because you either change the practice or you change the policy.
Yeah.
The two must align.
Yes.
And if the policy requires things that just aren't practical, then you're best to change the policy.
Mm-hmm.
And then you absolutely require the practices to equal the policy.
And we had some interesting, through this audit, we had some interesting discussions. So we had a couple that were part of this review that went up, a couple of big ones that actually went up to council for approval, that had a whole lot of governance oversight, because in our policy, we didn't address that. It got marked down. But yet it had probably one of the best oversight, but it wasn't matching the policy around having really complex, full detailed procurement plan, but it was kind of contained within the council paper. But because it wasn't a standalone document. So I think there's some real things, easy things that we can fix and try to get with this.
Yes.
That was one of my concerns too, because we've been so thin on the ground in procurement for such a long time. And there was a comment on page 25 around concern that the policy failures relate to basic elements of good practice and not just failing to follow a complicated process.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's, but yes, if you've got a complicated policy, it doesn't help. You know, so it's kind of, you can't blame staff for going, oh, this is just all too hard. And then they don't do the really basic things either, or do them well. And that's what you've got to try to avoid.
Yes.
And at the moment, you couldn't really be going in and saying this is just not acceptable, because you haven't given them a really decent framework to have so far. Alrighty.
Still got more.
Oh, right. Sorry, Tim.
Page 25, we talk about the contract owners holding the documentation rather than central docs. Contract owners, I presume, are staff within this organisation.
Yes.
So where are they holding it other than central docs?
So what that comment actually relates to is that when I worked it through with Deloitte, is that when they went to ask for the documentation, it wasn't in one folder on central docs, so it might be in several different folders, split across a couple of different activities. So the information my understanding was within our system, but it just wasn't in an easy accessible place. Like if I went to look at the Three Waters procurement, actually that's probably not a good example, but it probably is in a really good place. Shouldn't have been an example off the top of my head, but if I went to find, hey, I want to see all the documentation around this particular procurement, it might not just be in that one folder. So I think there is some work for us to do in terms of, you know, when we have staff changes, it's not easy for a staff member to come in and go, oh, I wonder what we did with Fulton Hogan last time, if we just jump into that folder. So there's work to do.
It's certainly needed a centralised depository for all contracts, but that,
Yes.
that comment from Deloitte reads differently to that.
Very much so. It reads that it's not in central docs as opposed to not being able easily to find in central docs.
It's in a folder somewhere.
Do
Yeah,
we
so-
have other document storage?
So what we do
Types of
have,
people
we
use.
do have OneDrive within our system. And I did debate this point with Deloitte, and we do have this one on here, our OneDrive. And so there is the ability up to 2 gigs for staff to save stuff within here, but that is accessible by IS. So there may be a practice there of stuff being saved onto the desktop that we need to work through. And that is an ongoing education. With staff, yeah.
Yeah, because that's just,
Yeah.
and I'm not staff, but I put my hand up, I've got nothing on central docs, it's all on the hard drive.
Yeah. And,
But
Yeah.
it's easy to do, but at
Yeah.
an organisational level, it's shambolic.
and I suppose my slight challenge when Deloitte and I were working this through is they didn't do the audit on site. It was done remotely as well. So I'm not sure if they saw the central docs system. I couldn't quite manage.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, well, as
That-
we work through the,
Working through it.
Yeah.
right, so, okay, so any more questions for now?
Yep, oh, Tamer, keep trying to get on you, so please.
No,
go.
that's all right. I'm just checking. There was one, and I'm just possibly skipping ahead to page 33. Talks about management response. Management accepts the recommendations as outlined, and that was around there being a checklist for staff to follow.
Mhm.
Just so that was due by the first quarter 23-24. That was probably something that was quite hopefully easily implemented, and was that underway?
I'm hoping that will be underway very shortly. So first quarter, of course, would be now. Will be finished, wouldn't it? But of course, the quarter.
23-24.
23.
Yeah, so you've got a couple of months, but I just thought if it's a
Yes.
matter of putting together a checklist that.
Yes, so that is, I say, all this, I'm hoping will be resourced very shortly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think I'll miss the deadline.
Make it panic.
Yeah.
Okay, so, all right, so perhaps, Tim?
Yeah, I did have some others, I'm just wondering if they're necessarily, the schedule, page 29, the schedule review in 21 didn't take place, that's because we didn't have a procurement officer, obviously.
That's correct. So there was some work done, by the lovely Alex sitting, there at the back, started to do a review. And had some conversations with staff that sort of were saying, hey, we're finding this a wee bit challenging. And at the same time, concurrently, the audit was happening. So it's like, hey, let's wait for the audit and let's just wrap up the audit.
And
And
that was a conscious, that was a conscious, decision made, and we revised and we agreed, so, it wasn't, that we were slipping.
No.
We didn't realise, so I think that's
Wonderful.
also that we did it
Yeah.
inadvertently, because we had a wonderful policy register now.
Yeah,
So we knew, and we had consciously decided it was worth waiting for.
Yeah.
But, you know, now you've got,
Mm.
some more guidance and we don't urgency.
And I think just one more thing, Madam Chair, and it's a comment on page 30 in relation to the lack of a conflict of interest form filled out. That's in a small town like ours, really can't be allowed to happen.
Yeah.
yes, and it was, I think, part of the theme of this audit is, when I've talked to Troy about that particular point, they could see evidence of, say, over email. I declared that I was related to so-and-so, and this is my suggestion how we manage it. There was some evidence of that, however, the form that was needed wasn't signed, so there is that real staff education piece that needs to happen.
Okay.
So,
Alrighty, right, so we're happy to note the report. I so move.
I'll second.
Thank you. All those in favour, say aye. Against? Correct. No doubt while I was in navigation of the lists.
Only both today.
Okay, so progress and preparation of the long-term plan.
Okay, me again. Give a second of my voice. Okay, so this is a slightly better news story, this one. So we are well and truly underway in preparation of the next long-term plan. I won't go through all the things that we have done. I think it's pretty self-explanatory what has been done. We are currently, working to the schedule. Probably the key thing for me to note today is, in light of what may or may not happen with the national elections, staff are obviously preparing the long-term plan according to the legislation, which is obviously 3 orders out. However, we need to be agile enough that we've got some thinking and thought ahead around if the world changes come October, that we're ready to change track. So I'm just going to sit down in the next short while and really work through this plan that we have in front of us, just to see that I've got all the key points in there. The other thing is, as I said when I first presented this up to you, fairly ambitious, our May 2024 target date. We have reached out to Audit New Zealand. We haven't heard back about timing. We will progress according to this, but whether or not Audit New Zealand will be able to accommodate us is another story.
Yeah.
Any questions?
I like the way you put the word potential in the bridges, and I recognise that that's staff not second guessing what may be in the capital investment for the next 10 years. Because I highlighted, what do you mean potential? But of course, I'm saying
Not my decision.
yes,
Not my decision.
because it
Yeah.
absolutely will be, but not your decision. It's a very good
Yeah.
report. Thank you.
I love the timelines presented.
Yeah, it's basically
Well, but no, not just cute, but actually tells the story.
really helpful.
It is very, very helpful, because otherwise it could look as complicated as hell. And I know you've got to do the LTP on the assumption that 3 orders goes ahead. You must, because the current legislation is in place for that to happen, albeit still more to come. But is there also, and it not, I suppose, not in the LTP, but is there also planning being done on what doesn't happen?
Yes, so there's a meeting happening this afternoon on that very subject, with some key staff included in our 3 orders director.
Right.
In terms of resolving.
In case, and yeah, because if National gets in and they pull it,
Yes,
then suddenly the LTP.
exactly.
So you've got that sort of plan B.
Yeah, and it would be quite an upheaval, because of course it's just not the financial modelling.
No?
Like I could get approval to do another model. I mean, it's a lot of work, but I could do that. It's running all through the infrastructure strategy, all through the finance strategy,
Yeah.
all through what we're wanting to achieve over the next 10 years. So it would be a complete rehash of the whole thing. So yeah, definitely it's on our mind.
Right. Okay.
To be ready if that is the case.
What are other councils doing around that, potentially having to run 2 substantial processes side by side on a just in case basis?
Yeah, no, everyone's doing the sort of falls that side by side, but certainly they're thinking that.
It's been done by most.
Councils.
I haven't struck an area that I've discussed it with that are doing something along those lines, because the impact of such a substantial change would be phenomenal, and
Yeah.
you can't start thinking about that on the 15th of October. It's just,
Yeah. Okay.
it's a very, very, very big ship to turn around, trying to stop on its tracks.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, well, that's good.
Saskia, that, when was the last time council saw that project timeline, because
Yes.
it's really good to send that out, probably just even in an email every time the Buzzy Bee moves, just to keep us all, just keep us all focused on here's where we're at.
Well, I think that would be a
Yes.
good recommendation.
Yes.
And,
Just
that's a really good point, Nita. I was remiss at our last workshop, the last council meeting, not to put this up on the screen. So, and we have quite a series of workshops coming up with council. So if it works, I'll make sure this is up on the screen and we can do it over email.
I think by email, because there's so many steps there, and we're only going to meet, once every 4 weeks or whatever, to get it on the screen. You probably jump 3 steps, and I think it's a really good focus reminder for this side of the organisation to go, yeah, here's where we're at.
just an email saying,
Yeah.
we've had a lot of discussion.
This is where we're at.
We've circulated.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you.
Madam Chair, would you like to be seen in the email? Or is it?
Well, I've got it, so I'm all good.
Yeah, all good, yeah.
Thanks every time we move.
Because
When you move it.
Yeah.
Yes, please, thank you. Yeah, no, great idea.
Follow the Buzzy Bee's journey.
Yeah.
Well, it's also, I think, should the Buzzy Bee get behind,
Oh,
that means we're going to know pretty much straight away, which is helpful to everybody.
yes, yeah, because we do have within Audit and Risk committee, we have that, oversight responsibility as well. Yeah, okay, brilliant, thank you. Right, well, I will, move that we receive the report and note the progress.
I'll second that.
Thank you. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
All right.
Against? Carried. We're up to policy and strategy register.
Another time though. Yeah, good morning. It's a quick one on the policy and strategy register today. Our overall organisational performance is 90.2. That's down on the last time we reported, which was 91.75. And that's due to 2 policies that have expired, the media policy that will be back in date shortly, and the sewer lateral policy which won't. Our oldest expired policy is the public toilet policy. That policy is in its final review stage, and that will bring our average expired time frame from 26 months up to 5.6 months.
That's fantastic.
As long as we don't count that Queenstown Library one. If we do, 9 months. So I haven't included those long-term holds in those figures, and once public toilet policy is in place, I'll start reporting on those as well. The policy is now in place and passed through council, so the focus for the policy half of me is now our bylaws process, and I'm also looking to improve transparency a little bit as well on some of these policies and processes, just doing some process mapping as well at the same time.
Brilliant.
Back to you.
And the fraud, bribery and corruption levels approved by council.
was, yeah.
Wasn't it?
That's back in place.
So, because here it shows that we're around a day.
I should have noted that it was all delayed.
During the dots. Hey, it is starting to look very tidy, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah, good work.
But I'd like to get it all in date eventually. That's the pipe dream maybe.
Yeah. Okay, questions or comments? Just had one and it arose from the annual report I left. Oh, goodness me, I can't remember where it was now. But just looking at people and culture, so this is page 52. And I think, again, because it's great to see what's there and it's up to date, and I was trying to look on what gaps are there that I would expect to see. And I think it's coming, but the remuneration policy is a work in progress, is my understanding. I read that somewhere, isn't it?
It is actually, we've got a policy out from that.
Have we? Because it's not on the list here, but I saw somewhere it was in draft form, so.
Totally,
Perfect. We'll add that to the register.
Okay, and the other one I had is, because we have a code of conduct for council, but I don't see near a code of conduct for staff.
I believe it's covered. That performance management? Scrolled into.
yeah, it's got the code of conduct. We are, however, looking at updating it, so we have we'll have another version of it, but we do actually have a code of conduct.
Okay, so that
Can add that in as
add
well.
into the human resource one. Okay. Well, it's good that you've got that.
Yeah.
Excellent. Alrighty. The other comment or question I had, and it's emergency management, and this is on page 54. And the note here is that community response plans, and that they're managed by the Otago Regional Council. So they're not included in the calcs because they're not your responsibility. But I would suggest that it would be worthwhile asking the Otago Regional Council and getting confirmation or assurance that they're up to date. Because you really do need to have up to date and available emergency response plans, even though they're not your responsibility.
Good to know that.
You know, given what's happening in other parts of New Zealand, to find out at on the dawn of the emergency that they're not up to date and no one knows where they are.
They are on our website, aren't they?
Yes, and Derek Shaw, I want to say maybe mid last year, went to all the community boards. So he's our emergency management officer here. He did go to all the community boards and talked about the plans in their area. But you're right, Linda, we just need to. It's probably a good idea just to know that keeping with Derek. Yeah.
Well, just to have the dates down the side as we
Well, I
do.
think we should populate it, noting that it's not council's responsibility, but having the dates there will make it very visible.
And
So
some of
perhaps
those
they
dates,
get that updated for next.
those dates are quite old when I looked them up on those plans. So
Well, that's
okay.
exactly right. And then, so then there's a piece of work to be done and they should be up to date. How do we get them up to date? So perhaps we'll report back next time on where it's at and what's been done about it, indeed, out of date. Be good. Yeah, but otherwise, well done. Okay, any further comments or questions? Neil, all good?
Yep, thank you.
I'll also move that we receive, that was another question. Police vetting guidelines.
Yeah.
It's only to ensure compliance with the Children's Act.
I believe it is, but I think there are some other places that. So is it only for Children's Act or do we use it elsewhere?
Yeah. Children's Act. Okay, right, well, I move that we receive the report.
I'll second that.
Thank you. All those in favour say aye.
All right.
Against? Carried. Okay.
Thank you, Karen.
Oh my goodness, update on free waters.
So you've got Patrick and I today, Christian tells unwell. So I'm going to just take that report as read and you'd better answer any questions that you might have about the program.
Thank you for the report, it's very good. Just open up for questions.
Any updates, Patrick?
No, not really. We've just got the water renewals tender out now, so that's good. It's running on time, so we'll see what be interesting because it's the first sort of tender of the season, so it'll be quite interesting to see what kind of pricing we get and what kind of interest we get from other contractors. Sort of maximum we've had in my sort of 3 or 4 years here has probably been 4 or 5 tenderers with some good ability to do the work. So it'll be interesting to see if that profile's changed much. In terms of the actual work we're doing, we can see out there we've got a bit happening. The Lake Dunstan water supply water treatment plant is, you know, we're right in the home straight with that, and we hope to fully commission that on May the 18th. But yeah, otherwise the main work we're doing is really investigation and design work. There's a big job up Bridge Hill that we're doing, which is a water main replacement, and the team are doing investigation work, digging up the ground to see what the ground's like. There's a lot of rock there, so we managed a bit of risk by going into the properties that were nearby and doing surveys on the houses. So we'll do pre and post work surveys just to make sure that we haven't created any issues in any of the properties. That's just some of the work we do on some of the projects.
Just on the opening discussion, we say that if the transition doesn't occur, then our carry forwards of unspent budget would be minimal and council would be in a good position to deliver future planned work. And I can't, it may be the spectre of paying for that future planned work that I've got in my head, but I can't see how we will have spent our reserves. So we have basically no reserves. And we've got a pile of work that will need to be done to get ourselves compliant with, let's just say, the drinking water standards outside of Alex Clyde, and that's it. How can we say we'd be in a good position? Because I think we'd be in a nightmare position.
I can tell you, I can explain that a little bit. So, we will know if we're transitioning or not, before we've delivered all of this. So, in terms of the reserves, this is the stormwater reserves. That's the big one that we would probably have spent if we were transitioning. In terms of the Cromwell development contributions from our wastewater and water, we really need to be spending those now because the growth's happening faster than we had anticipated. So when your DCs are tracking ahead of what you budgeted, that's an indication that you're going to have to pull projects in those areas forward. So that's not really a problem for us. That's a good thing that we're getting on top of that, because otherwise we could be in a position of having to delay approvals for connections because we wouldn't have the capacity. In terms of the stormwater, look, we're not going to have that spent by October this year, and we'll know then what's happening with the government changes.
Yeah, but if we were going to have it spent between October and July next year, the contracts wouldn't they need to be in place? Wouldn't the work need to be like almost ready to go? It seems a very short period of time.
Yes.
7, 8 months.
It's
It's 9 months.
Yeah, we can have everything ready.
No.
Yeah. Look, we won't do work that wouldn't need to be done
Oh,
obviously anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, so let's be honest, there's going to be a lot of councils in a worse off position if reform doesn't go ahead. I know of a couple of councils that are hitting come close to their debt ceiling.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So they are already scaling back their programs because they need to be able to manage their debt costs and their debt levels. So we're probably in a better position than some, but yeah, and so I did talk with the Otago Regional Council yesterday, and it's interesting what you hear come through from councils and submissions to government versus sometimes what
Reality.
the economic situation actually is.
Is that submissions from staff or mayors? Don't need to answer that.
No.
Rhetorical question.
But what you're saying is you're working through the programs
Yeah,
of what needs to be done, and it's progressing well.
yeah,
And regardless of and the program is being prioritised by what is needed,
yeah.
not by who might own.
Yeah,
the assets.
apart from probably we're bringing forward some stormwater work to make sure the reserves get spent, but we wouldn't have done otherwise.
Right.
But the rest of the stuff is all in our programs.
And so if it does or doesn't go ahead, the only question will be then not should we do it, or how can we do it, but how do we fund it?
Yeah, that's going to be a big question.
That's the question, but the work is the work that needs to be done, and that work is progressing well.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're also trying to get a few pieces of work and projects that are at a stage where they're ready to procure as well, so that things don't fall off a cliff at the end of
The 30th.
July 1, 2024.
Yeah.
So we're trying to be a bit more strategic there so that we can
Handy
play
double
through the
project.
process.
So
Yeah, so contractors' workloads are continuous, and that's a piece of work I'm doing regionally at the moment to work on. I think we might start being able to work more regionally in procurement as well as we approach that transition date. And even if transition didn't go ahead, I'd suggest that we might still want to start with more regionally on procurement anyway.
probably the also.
Yeah.
And I would suggest we all should.
Yeah.
But it sounds quite rosy, but from my position, I'm always
Oh, like we.
concerned Things are trucking along quite well, but, you know,
You're almost afraid to say that.
yeah,
And I think we say that at the start, this is an ambitious program
Yes,
for
yeah,
us.
it is.
Yeah.
but it's necessary to put our communities in the best place possible should what's in the law at the moment occur.
Yeah, and look,
It needs to be emphasised.
the best thing, the best situation when, the best situation is we get everything done. The second best situation is we have everything procured and started.
Yeah,
So, all that would mean is that we would be handing over less debt, but the projects would be absolutely committed. And there's no pulling back from them.
that's
So,
really good.
You just need everybody to be out there on the day with the shovel somewhere. or-
well, no, we need to let the contracts, if we've let the contracts,
Yeah,
there's a contractual commitment for the entity to carry on.
Yeah, and I think there is a risk that
Yeah.
that contract commitment will be prevailing if it doesn't go ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but there are things that we need done.
Yeah,
And-
exactly.
And
And
look,
so
I
the
have,
modeling's going to be done on that
Yeah.
basis as well.
I have seen a glimpse of their draft prioritisation process, and like I say, it was a glimpse. The slide went past that fast, I couldn't even take a screenshot of it. They are prioritising first, the work councils have committed already in their 2021 LTPs, because the communities have been told those projects go ahead, and then the next priorities, getting things compliant. And after that, down the list some way is growth. So I think it's really important we keep those growth projects and
absolutely.
trucking along.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. It sounds like a sound stream.
Yeah.
Any more questions? I will move that we, see the report.
I'm going to second that.
Those in favour say aye.
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 Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
So my phone buzzing around the table.
Right, health and safety.
Fiona. Yes, not a budget day. So is it okay to take this report as read?
Yes.
Thank you. So I am going to take you through the health and safety aspects of this report, give you some of the key highlights, and then I'll hand over to Lou. She's going to take us through the wellbeing section, as it relates a lot to people and culture this time around. So this report covers that sort of Christmas and New Year's period, and we really tried to start this year as we want to continue with health and safety. So that meant a due diligence workshop for our executive leadership team. So we collaborated with an external consultant on how we want to deliver due diligence at that most senior level. And we've already started to operationalise that with a couple of our executive leadership team members have done critical risk observations on site. That was in our pools. They went on to the pools to look at hazardous substances and discovered that manual handling is another area of interest. So it really worked out as intended. We found areas that we wanted to really focus on. And then the second primary focus is our contractor management. So from the last meeting, I went away and did a bit of an investigation into what reports and documents we do have from our contractors as part of those contractor meetings and our management processes. And I found 28 incidents that contractors had reported to council in those reports, and was able to capture them in our incident reporting system. And what I've taken away from that is that we need to come up with a way that we can get that information from those contractor meetings into our systems so we're aware of what's happening. Because although the majority of them were things like manual handling, minor property damage to contractors' assets, there were a couple of fires in the solid waste transfer stations that, although minor and resolved, were really good to know about. So at the time that I put this report together, I put a proposal out to our contract managers of a way that they can summarise that data on a monthly basis and send it to me, and I'm getting their feedback.
Right, and then you can start to capture it, because it could be that there's health and safety guidelines that aren't being followed, that you guys require to be followed, or there are guidelines that can be enhanced from those learnings, and that's
And I think it's about having that connection and communication with
That
them.
visibility.
Yeah.
Sure.
And then the next thing I wanted to cover was that we had 40 incident reports during that period, and there were 4, I guess, incidents that I'd consider particularly notable. We had a lost time injury in the pool that was to do with manual handling. So quite timely that showed up at the same time that our executive leadership team were doing those risk observations. And we know that that's an area we want to find out where can we minimise and reduce our manual handling. We had a near miss in the solid waste transfer centres, so that related to a contractor who was threatened by a member of the public over fees for waste transfer, and the police attended that, resulting in a trespass. So we thought that was really notable. The contractor has provided de-escalation and training and support for their staff, but we also thought, how is that going to affect our own staff here at council as well in those confrontational situations? And the last
Can you
two
tell
were
us which transfer station?
Alexandra,
Oh, really?
really local, just around the corner.
Hmm.
Then the last 2 were medical treatment injuries, both for members of the public, and they were both involved injuries occurring after a trip, slip or fall. So one was in the Cromwell Mall, and then the other was in Clyde, which was tripping over some fencing gates around the wastewater work. So the person knew that those protective factors were in place, but they still managed to trip over. But
Or they're climbing over the fence, or
it sounded like they were left their home and they knocked into them the wrong way, and it just
Mind elsewhere and.
Yeah.
mind elsewhere, and it ended up with a broken arm. So,
oh dear, okay.
but the important things to note as well, because when it comes to things that happen to the public, trip, slips and falls are a big feature, and it's the same in our aquatics as well. So we want to be ashore of them. I'll hand over to Lou to give you a couple of lines about wellbeing as well.
So just a question on the executives going out and doing their observations.
Yes.
Do councillors do that?
Not specifically, I mean, we have gone on trips and looked at infrastructure, but not through health and safety means.
Yeah, just, I know in local authorities, there's an accountability that sits with the CA, the accountability doesn't sit with council, but responsibility still sits with council.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's the moral obligation as well. So I can provide some resources and maybe
It might
of
be
a
worth just
workshop
thinking
element.
about how to expand it.
Yeah, because we can work that into the visits that you're already doing.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, here we go.
Maybe even after the LTP, a presentation at a workshop on, this sort of thing and the basics, because we're eyes and ears on the ground as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Sometimes people get tired of me. Health and safety, because I'm a bit on board with it.
Yeah.
It wouldn't hurt for, 12 6 hours.
For sure.
And it's quite good to have some of those examples that people who don't work in amongst it every day wouldn't necessarily have thought of around health and safety as well.
Yes, definitely.
Sorry.
You've done that. Just a quick update on wellbeing. So one of the bigger projects that we're working on in the background at the moment is reward and recognition project. So that's being carried out at the moment by Kirsten, and it's going around and checking in with the team and asking what they value most about reward and recognition, and what new initiatives that would they like to see with reward and recognition, and what they're aware of that we are already offering reward and recognition space. So the purpose of that is being able to collate all that information and look for some key things, and then understand where we can go into the future with reward and recognition work extremely important. So understanding what's important to the team. We had EAP, Employee Assistance Program, data come back. And one of the key things that happened, mainly in the month of October, was that there was a lot of bereavement that hit our team in that first quarter. So it affected quite a few people in October. And just a point to note, remembering some of the numbers, I'm talking about how many times that theme was brought up with the EAP counsellor, not the number of people. So
really important key to reading that report. Another point of note that I just wanted to touch on was wellbeing is becoming really important to us on the executive management team, and so we're doing our wellbeing check-ins as a team, and then we're also going through with our eating digest and updating the team. We're doing a wellbeing check with the team, so it's all about promoting those open and honest conversations and connecting with the team. So it's become a very big focus for us. And you'll look on the last page, we've got all of our events that have been happening, and there was employee awards in December, Aotearoa Bike Challenge, which was really good, 54 employees and 20,000 kilometres cycled. That's a lot. And currently we're doing Move It March, and there's a bit of competition going on here with that as well. So some good stuff happening. That's great. Any questions?
Excuse me, ironic as I sneezed. We've done flu vaccinations in the past. We're doing that again, even into winter, and I just heard on the radio yesterday they're expecting a whooping cough again. So
Yes.
that's something that's on your radar as well. 'Cause-
Yeah.
Yeah, but it only lasts 6 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've known 2 adults to have it, and I don't want it.
Yes.
It's terrible.
Yes, flu vaccinations definitely coming up in the month of April.
Right, thank you.
Anything else?
I just make an observation that you've picked up in terms of the Cromwell Mall and the slip trip hazard.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, I think we've got some signs, but the signs won't make them. Well, the reality is, they're not going to stop someone from slipping or tripping. It's just the nature, and probably the most important thing I'm sure we're well on top of is to make sure that the condition doesn't exist in the first place, insofar as we can.
Yeah.
And then acknowledge they can't help that people actually do have slips and trips because we're actually human. We have some failings.
Of course.
The speed bump in the car park, is that this car park out?
Yes, that's this one.
And I did just wonder in the bottom of page 78, and it talks about occupational violence and aggression and the work environment and putting in that speed bump. And I just wondered if we have any challenges for our staff coming and going with our neighbours and their guests who come and go.
No, it was purely the speed of the vehicles that they were worried about.
Yeah.
You know, there are some, minor concerns. We're mindful that we need to keep our garages closed and locked. But in terms of like that interpersonal confrontation, that's not something that's ever been brought up to me in over 2 years here.
Usually on best behaviour.
Yeah.
Well, I just think sometimes they come out and they're not particularly happy.
Yeah, coming
And
out.
we have lovely staff coming in and out of the door.
Yeah.
So we do have 3 staff sitting in the hub that sit in my team, and as Rach said, they've never raised that, but I can ask the question and see how the feeling of Rach thing.
Yeah.
Would like us to just to check.
I guess it should be with no, because you don't want it to all of a sudden someone comes swimming out of the air and he's carrying the coffees back to the office or.
And I think something to be aware of and to note is to make sure within our training that we've got that de-escalation training on board, or how would they react or act if it did actually happen as well. So
Withdrawals, yeah, and withdraw themselves from the situation if they needed to.
yeah.
Okay, thank you. So
Thanks a lot.
So formally, I move we receive the reports.
Oh, super.
Right. All those in favour say aye.
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 Against? Financial report.
Aye.
And Dana.
So I take the paper as being read. So for the first 6 months ending the 31st of December 2022, there's an overall favourable variance of $139,000. The operating income had a favourable variance of $854,000. This is driven by the development and reserve contributions of $2.1 million.
This is offset with the Waka Kotahi subsidies having an unfavourable variance of $970,000, and also land sales which haven't happened at present of $1 million, and also the metered water sales of $741,000. So the Waka Kotahi subsidies fluctuate based on the work program, and our metered water sales are due for their second reading for the March and April and May months, which should bring that back in line. So the unfavourable operating expenditure variance is $715,000. This is driven by a few different things, but the big one is depreciation. So the 30 June 2022 revaluation of assets created a significant increase in the value of our assets held in the fixed asset register. The additional depreciation expense has not been collected through rate funded depreciation and can be treated as a non-cash increase in expenditure. Other unfavourable areas to note include contracts. This is predominantly due to the emergency works carried out at the Omakau wastewater treatment plant for the flooding event in July. This is funded from the emergency event funds. And we also have an increase in the water services requests and reactive repairs. Understanding that can be smoothed out a little bit towards the end of the year, so I'm not 100% sure at this stage where we will end up in that area. Grants also have an unfavourable variance. This is mainly due to the Roxburgh Pool grant of $500,000. This was in the last year's annual plan budgets and has been brought forward to this year. And we also have a few grants which have been issued through resolution outside of the budgets, including the Central Otago Goldfields Trust, Alexandra District Museums, and the Cromwell White Park. So cost of sales has a favourable variance, which is offsetting all of these unfavourable variances of $2.4 million. And this is linked to the timing of the subdivisions, and the costs will be allocated at the same time that the titles are issued. So the capital expenditure program has spent so far 24% of the revised budget. A lot of the projects are at a mixture of statuses, from the timing of the project budgets to the work programs, the contractors' availability, where they are at the design and investigation stage through to the planning stages. So a big chunk of that is the Cromwell Master Plan. And as we know, that is still progressing. So accounts receivable has an outstanding balance of $368,000. This is predominantly the Waka Kotahi subsidies, just due to the time lapse when they are received and when they are invoiced. There is 112,000 outstanding accounts receivable greater than 90 days, and these are all being actively managed. At the moment, we have no term deposits with the bank. This is due to us managing our projects through cash flow as a way of reducing the impact of external debt borrowing. And our external debt at the moment, as of December 2022, the council has uplifted 15 million of the planned 47.7 million in the annual plan for 2022-23. Internal loans, there is a forecasted closing balance of $4.14 million for 30 June 2023, and our external loans with our community groups has a opening balance at the beginning of this year of $134,000, and as at December an outstanding balance of $104,000. Happy to answer any questions. Thank you. Questions?
Thank you. Thanks, Donna. Page 86, the table on internal loans. The internal loan for water of 663, is that all that remains of our internal Three Waters loans?
So that one, I believe, relates to old loan for Roxburgh Water.
That's Roxburgh. Probably.
Yes.
It's,
Yeah, because if you look at our reserves table, of course, our actual water function is a lot larger than.
That's what I thought. I was like, hang on, that doesn't quite add up to me.
Yes.
Thank you.
Any others? I just said, a couple of things. Now I appreciate this report is through to December because that's the, the cycle we're on, but has anything emerged in the last couple of months that's sort of, unexpected or we need to be aware of or anything like that?
Not to the best of my.
Okay.
Yeah.
Probably one thing for awareness of this committee that we really want to look through with the long-term plan is looking at our reserves that are quite in the red, take the Cromwell and Alex Falls, for example, and really thinking about what our financial strategy is going forward. So through the last LTP, it was the first time we went into debt, so I think that's where our focus was, and having a really good look at some of our accounts, it's like, well, what are we doing for the future to pay back some of this stuff? So that's some of the stuff that the finance team have been talking about recently, is around what does that future financial strategy look like? Yeah.
And I just got a question on meters that just piqued my interest when you say the secondary. So the meters, the water meters, they'll be physically read and not smart meters.
No, I don't. I believe we had someone going around and reading actual meters. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But they were installed 14 years ago, so they're in their natural life, so they're being as replacements are coming. My understanding is that they will be smart meters, or the smart meters being considered, I think might be.
Yeah.
And there's a budget alongside the benefit that still needs to be looked at. I think I'm right in that. No water people in the room, but I think I'm right.
Yeah, you are.
Thank you.
And it was that just shows you how forward thinking we were of the time, thinking about putting meters in place. Good way to control costs, as it turns out, funnily enough.
Good job, now.
And then the not funding depreciation, that rings a bell, wasn't it? That was discussed in last year.
Yes.
And it's a timing issue, and then the next year it kicks in again.
Yes, and again, I think that's going to be quite a focus when we bring the financial strategy as part of the long-term plan. What we're going to do with our depreciation in general. So I think there's some of the conversations we had down this table.
Yep.
Made a couple of resolutions. I can't remember if it was after Christmas or before Christmas.
I think so.
Just before.
Yeah.
With water and roading to depreciate fund for the renewal programs. So it's just to alleviate next year's rates increase. Yeah. Which was relatively significant based on depreciation funding alone.
Okay, so it was for next year's.
Yes, so that's for this annual plan coming up.
We need 324.
324. Given the increase in when we did the revaluations, would have been quite a significant rates increase.
Yeah.
But of course that does pose a question of what we're going to do
going
forward.
So for the LTP, we will look through all the financial strategy, including really looking into the depreciation funding.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm just going back a step for me, Madam Chair. Donna, the reserve funds looking at our water supply and wastewater is now 30 million. Red. How much of that's internal and how much is external?
So everything in the this is one area that's a little bit hit and miss at the moment. So the total borrowing for the water and wastewater are recognised in the reserve funds at the moment, which is a mixture of internal funding through reserves and external debt. I believe we have a breakdown on page 86 of the debt funding for water and wastewater. So at the moment, we have 10 million of external debt for water and 5 million for wastewater.
Yeah.
So
So this
all
is-
external debt at the moment is the water,
Yes.
one of the two,
Yeah.
plus there's the reserves, which are effectively internal.
I had seen that
Yeah.
4 days ago when I read it and forgot it. And just going back to that internal loan for the Roxburgh water, with water being districtised, I'm just unsure why that's in a separate place.
So when the internal loan was set up, it was set up to borrow from another reserve account rather than, it's been sitting for, well, since I've been here. So I'm not 100% sure which reserve account it's actually being funded from. And it's actually set up to structured repayment to pay back the reserve that it's borrowed from. So that's what all of our internal loans do. Whereas our reserve funds are set up as a deficit and they use the surplus and deficits to balance those accounts each year. So this is where the comment about looking into our funding and financing strategy needs to be looked into, because we've got a mixture of internal loans which hasn't been used in recent years as a structure, to having the deficit pots in our reserve funds accounts. So we need to ensure that our reserve funds are actually being repaid appropriately, whereas that's what the initial internal loans were set up for. So it is a little bit confusing.
Little bit.
It's confusing for me as well
Yeah.
when I first heard that.
Yeah.
And
So hodgepodge of previous decisions made over decades that aren't rational.
Doing together, that's a concept.
yeah, so you generally with a change in staff, there's a change in how things happen. And I think,
Slightly rational, isn't it?
yeah, so
Thank you.
the LTP will be very much focused on that financing.
Yeah.
All of those.
And so, again, through water assets are handed over. The external debt obviously would go over, and the reserves as are here, that would be the internal debt that would go over.
So the reserves at the moment for the water and wastewater areas, I believe will go with the new entity as a part of a loan, because they are effectively debt, yes.
Yeah.
So we won't be held accountable for that, is my understanding. Unfortunately, I'm not too involved in any of those conversations.
Okay.
It's not,
So
it's not carved in rock at the moment. So,
Yeah, well, that's the other thing. So if you're carrying this as internal debt, and I suppose if it's at some stage it might, if they can't give you commitment that it is going to go, then you're going to externalise.
that's absolutely
That's the
topic of
sort of,
discussion.
okay, so that still hasn't been clarified.
No.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So it's a risk and once, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Sitting here.
It's that balance between paying the higher rate of interest, which is significant over these amounts
For a wee while.
for a wee while. And yeah, that's. I'll hang on that up.
Yeah. Okay. No further questions. Thank you. Excellent report. So I will move that we do we receive the report.
I'll second that.
Thank you. And favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Against? Carried. Okay, here we go. We're on a run down to Wellington Chair's report. I don't have anything. Members report.
I just had a very small health and safety matter in relation to Clyde Hill, which the road up to the reservoir has been closed while there's a lot of traffic movements, but there was, and I can see why it happened, that the footpath to go up the hill was closed. But the road wasn't closed because you're not allowed to drive up the road that way anyway. But people were walking up it and thereby walking into your site. And when I say people, I mean me. Because I would have footpath closed on my morning walk and just waddled out.
Often, yeah.
Often, well, that it doesn't help that part
Have you
of,
tripped over again?
part of the footpath's actually gouged out, so you could reasonably, so I worked it through with Patrick and it was like, oh yeah, got it, and it's now closed off properly, but it was just, you could absolutely see how it happened. You could also see how it could go wrong, because I fell for it myself, like, oh yeah, the footpath's. So I wandered up the road, yeah, because you can't drive it the wrong way, so, and I'm a club local, so I should know better, so it's really good before Easter comes that that's been closed off for visitors.
Well, absolutely for visitors, isn't
Yeah,
it?
but the response was very good. It was like,
Yeah.
oh, okay,
Okay.
we'll sort that, so I was pleased with that.
We need to just receive that,
Yeah.
don't we?
Yeah.
Right, well, we'll move that we received a report, and it's good to know that the responsiveness was there. Well, mind you, being the mayor, you could be. Still.
I get more, you know, I get taken more seriously here than at home, and it's nice.
Even if I'm surprised you just didn't walk up the footpath and ignore the sign anyway.
Well, I wouldn't do such a thing now.
No, because as people, we don't do those sort of things, do we?
No, we're not people, we're elected members, and therefore I'll leave it there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Subject to higher scrutiny. So,
I'll move that we receive that report.
I'll do that.
No, you can't. Our report. Someone else, thank you.
Aye.
Thank you.
Yes.
It's carried. Good. Okay, governance reports, unless there's any conversation that we need to have, I'll just move that we, receive that.
Yep, I'll second that.
Thank you. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
It's
Aye.
carried. We have the next meeting for the 2nd of June. Just need to note that, we don't actually know down more. And perhaps we should just resolve to go into non-public and then have a momentary break.
Yeah.
So I will, so move, the resolution to go into non-public. I'm sure someone's seconding that. Yes.
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 Sorry.
Well, that's
Not
not
really
going to say
going to the
aye.
next thing.
Aye. Excellent. Okay, sorry guys, we're just running a wee bit late. We're going to have a quick break.